Hey guys, I'm here in my favorite Chelsea jersey. Nobody can stop Pulisic. He just keeps scoring and scoring. Although I hope he comes back to the MLS. Anyways, I'm going to knock off 2 chapters. We finished off with chapter 16. And today we're going to knock off chapter 17 and maybe 18. Because 18 is really not that long. So let's begin. Luke spent practically every second of the next 3 days either reliving his secret visit to Jen or planning another one. The first day, a government inspector came out to examine the gardener's crop, so Luke stayed in his room the entire day. The second day, it rained, and Dad spent the morning doing bookwork in the house. The third day, Dad was back in the fields, but when Luke crept over to the back door promptly at 9 a.m. and daringly flipped the light switch, he got no answering flash from Jen's house. Maybe the clocks in her house were slow. He left the light on for 15 whole minutes, terrified the whole time that someone besides Jen might see it. Finally, heartsick, he switched it off and climbed with shaky legs back to his room. What if something had happened to Jen? What if she were sick, dying, or even alone in her house? He's just making excuses. He wants to go over and see her. What if she'd been caught or turned in? Just from the little time Luke had spent with her, he could tell she took a lot of risks. It had never occurred to him that knowing another person would give him someone else to worry about. He steadied himself by leaning against the wall at the top of the stairs and reminded himself of less frightening possibilities. Maybe one of her parents was just out running errands, not working, so they were going to be home soon. Maybe, and he tried to think of another safe reason that Jen hadn't signaled for him to come, but he had so much trouble picturing her ordinary life that his imagination failed him. He found out the next day, when he risked a dash to Jen's house as soon as Jen answered his signal. "Where were you?" he asked. "When? Yesterday?" She yawned, sliding the door shut behind him. "Did you try to come over?" "I'm sorry, Mom had a free day and made me go shopping." Luke gaped at her. "Shopping? You went out?" Jen nodded nonchalantly. "But I didn't see you leave," Luke protested. Jen looked at him as if she seriously wondered if he had a brain. "Of course not. I was hiding. The back seat of our car is hollowed out. Dad had it custom built." "You went out?" Luke repeated. "Well, it's not like I saw anything until we got to the mall. 2 hours of riding in the dark is not my idea of fun. I hate it. But at the mall, you got out and you didn't have to hide?" Jen laughed. "Mom got me a forged shopping pass long time ago. Supposedly I'm her niece. It's good enough to convince store clerks. But if the population police ever found me in a roadside stop, I'd be dead. There you have it, my mother's priorities. Shopping is more important than my life." Luke shook his head and sat down on the couch because his knees were feeling a little shaky. I didn't know thirds can do that. But what if Mother and Dad got him a forged pass? For a minute, he could almost picture it. They could hide him under the burlap bags in the pickup truck bed until they got into town. Everybody in town knew Mother and Dad. Everybody knew Mother and Dad had only 2 sons, Matthew and Mark. "You went to the city?" he said. "Well, yeah, but you don't see any malls around here, do you?" "What was it like?" Luke almost whispered. "Boring," Jen said. "Really, really boring. Mom wanted me to buy a dress, and who knows why. So we went to one store after another, and I had to try on all these dresses that scratched and pricked and poked me. And then she made me get a bunch of breasts." "Oh," she said when Luke blushed a red D. "I guess you don't talk much about..." "Oh, sorry. I'm not used to reading this. I guess you don't talk much about bras in your house." If you guys look in the book, see the way it's written, it has like a line after it, meaning it's a word she didn't half pronounce. So, it's bras. Yeah, I don't talk much about that. "Matthew and Mark do sometimes when they're being dirty," Luke said. Aye, aye, aye. Well, bras aren't dirty, Jen said. They're just torture devices invented by men or mothers or something. Oh, Luke said, looking down. But anyway, Jen said, with a bounce that propelled her off the couch, I checked you out in the computer and you're all right. You don't exist. Not officially, anyway. So you're safe. And, hearing Jen say that so flippantly, you don't exist, made Luke feel kind of funny. How do you know I'm safe? Well, the fingerprints, Jen said. When Luke gave her a blank look, she explained, my brother Braun went through this phase when he wanted to be a detective. Not that he ever would have been smart enough for it, and I remembered he still has a fingerprinting kit. So I dusted for your fingerprints on things you touched, just like on the TV, and I got a really good print off the wall, and then I scanned that into the computer, linked into the national file of fingerprints, and voila! I discovered your fingerprints don't exist, so neither do you officially. Wow, Jen's really techie. She made a mocking face for emphasis. Luke wanted to ask, the population police can't find me because of what you did, can they? But he understood so little of what she'd explained that he didn't think it would help to ask anything, and Jen was already on to the next thought. And anyhow, you seem trustworthy, so now that I know you're safe, I can tell you about the rally and the show and our secret chat rooms and everything. Jen was already leaving the room, so he had to follow just to hear the rest of her sentence. Want something to eat or drink? She asked, hesitating at the doorway to the grand kitchen. I was so surprised. I forgot to be a good hostess the last time. What'll it be? Soda? Potato chips? But those are illegal, Luke protested. And he remembered reading something about junk food in one of the books in the attic and asking Mother about it. She'd explained that it was something people used to eat all the time until the government shut down the factories that made it. She wouldn't tell him why. But as a special treat, she'd brought out a bag of potato chips she'd been saving for years and shared them just with him. Ooh. They were salty, but hard to chew, and Luke had pretended to like them only because Mother seemed to want him to. Well, yeah, we're illegal too, so why shouldn't we enjoy ourselves? Jen asked, thrusting a bowl of chips at him. To be polite, Luke took one chip, then another, and another. These potato chips were good. He had to hold himself back from grabbing them by the handful. Jen stared at him. It must be Doraditas, the barbecue. Do you go hungry sometimes? She asked in a low voice. No. Well, some shadow children do because they don't have food and ration cards, and the rest of their family doesn't share, she said, opening a refrigerator that was bigger than every appliance in the Garner's kitchen put together. My family can get all the food we want. Of course, but she looked at him in a way that once again made him conscious of his ragged clothes. How does your family get food for you? The question puzzled Luke. The same way they get it for themselves, he said. We grow it. We have a garden. I used to work in it a lot before, you know. And then we have the hogs, or used to. And I guess sometimes we'd trade a butchered hog for someone else's butchered steer, and so we'd have beef. Those were all shadowy transactions in Luke's mind. He had to strain his brain to remember overhearing Dad or Matthew reporting to Mother, ready to cook some steak. Johnson up near Libertyville wants some ham. Jen dropped a plastic bottle full of brown liquid. You eat meat? She exclaimed. Sure, don't you? Luke asked. When Dad can get it, Jen said, bending to pick up the bottle. She poured a glassful for Luke and one for herself. Both drinks fizzed and bubbled. Even his clout isn't that great. The government's trying to force everyone, even the barons, to become vegetarians. Why? Jen handed him the glass. Something about vegetables being more efficient, she said. Farmers have to use a lot more land to produce 1 pound of meat than to produce a pound of, what is it called? Soybeans. Luke wrinkled his nose at the thought of eating soybeans. Well, I don't know, he said. We always fed our hogs the grain we couldn't sell because it didn't meet government standards. But since the government made us get rid of our hogs, Dad just lets that grain rot in the field. Well, really? Jen grinned as if she just announced the overthrow of the government. She thumped him on the back just as he took his first sip of soda. Between the bubbly drink and her enthusiastic pounding, Luke started coughing. Jen didn't seem to notice. See? I told you you'd be a big help. I'm gonna go post that on the bulletin board right now. Wait, Luke sputtered between coughs. He didn't know what she was talking about, but he couldn't let her get his family in trouble. He chased her down the hall, catching up just as she was sliding into the chair in front of the computer. She switched it on, and it made the sounds. Yeah, you guys don't understand because you weren't alive in the 1990s. That Luke had heard the last time. Luke stood to the side, carefully out of the sight of the screen. It's not going to bite you, Jen said. Grab a chair, sit down. Luke inched back. But the government! The government's incompetent and stupid, Jen said. Get it? Believe me. If they were watching through my computer screen, I'd know by now. Meekly, Luke pulled over a padded chair, sat down. He watched as Jen typed in, if the government let farmers feed their animals the grain they can't sell, there'd be more meat. Luke was relieved that she hadn't mentioned his family, but unless the government was spying on them, he couldn't understand what difference it made for her to write that. Where did that go? He asked as the words disappeared. Who's going to see it? I put it on a Department of Agriculture bulletin board. Anyone with a computer can find it now. Maybe a government worker with half a brain will see it and actually think for the first time this decade. But, Luke was in confusion, why does it matter? Jen fixed her gaze on Luke. You don't even know, do you? You don't know why they passed the population law. No, I don't. Well, it's all about food, Jen said. The government was scared we'd all run out of food if the population kept growing. That's why they made you and me illegal, to keep people from starving. Luke suddenly felt doubly guilty for the potato chips he was still cramming into his mouth. He swallowed hard and lowered his hands to his lap instead of back into the chip bowl. So if I didn't eat, my food would go to someone who was legal, Luke said. But in his family, that would just be Matthew or Mark, and they were hardly starving. Matthew was even starting to sport the same roll of fat around his waist that Dad had. And then Luke remembered the tramp from long ago, saying, I ain't ate in 3 days. Was that Luke's fault? Jen laughed. Stop looking so worried, she said. That is what the government thinks, but they're wrong. My dad says there's plenty of food, it's just not distributed right. That's why they've got to stop the population law. That's why they've got to recognize you and me and all the other shadow kids. And that's why we're going to have the rally. As ignorant as he was, Luke can tell from the way she said it that the rally was important. Can you tell me about the rally now? He asked humbly. Yes, Jen said. She pushed away from the computer and twirled on her chair. Hundreds of us, all the shadow children I could track down, are going to march on the government in protest. We'll go right to the president's house. We won't leave them alone until they give us the same rights as everybody else has. Just my luck, Luke thought. I finally meet another third child, and she's absolutely crazy. And, Jen said, as bubbly as the shaken soda, you can come too. Won't it be great? That was a longer chapter. I'm just going to stop there. 18 will be for later. But yeah, very interesting idea as I was reading this. And again, I keep telling you this is like the first time I've read that chapter. So my idea, it jumped back to World War II. And the idea is that the government has total control over the food. And who controls the food and the distribution of the food? They control the people. You control the masses. So in World War II, we had a Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was the head of the Soviet Union, and he battled against Hitler in World War II. But during that war, he had to gather all the food in giant Soviet Union. And where do you get the food from? Where's the best fruit from? What did Hitler call the breadbasket of Europe? The breadbasket of Europe is Ukraina, Ukraine. And so by taking all of the food from Ukraine and distributing the food north to Petersburg to other parts of Russia, Stalin ended up starving about 14 million Ukrainians. Don't quote me on the number, but do a Google search on Stalin and World War II and Ukrainians being starved to death because Stalin totally controlled the food supply. So the ideas that are coming in this book are not only had they been realities in the past, but they're kind of realities now, and they're going to be, again, realities in the future. So these are just massive themes we're dealing with. So yeah, you guys are doing a great job, and I'll see you later for chapter 18.